Are you ready to journey down a shadowy marble hallway lit only by the flicker of oil lamps into the forbidden heart of ancient Egypt? Imagine standing there, trembling, as you witness a ritual that would chill your bones, a practice so utterly shocking that history itself tried to erase it. If you thought Egyptian pyramids hid lost treasure, brace yourself. The real secrets are darker, deeper, and tangled in flesh and faith. Let's plunge straight in. Forget everything you've learned about the fairy tale Egypt of dazzling gold and mighty pharaohs. The truth is far wilder and infinitely more disturbing. Picture this. You're an ancient Egyptian royal embalmer. The air is thick, the chamber silent except for your pounding heart. The pharaoh's beloved wife lies before you, yet this is no ordinary mummification. The high priests have whispered instructions that break every sacred law you've ever learned. Their eyes bore into you, demanding you commit acts that would make even the gods shudder. This wasn't imagined horror, it was the everyday nightmare for some Egyptians. A civilization where sexual acts weren't just private, they were cosmic, political, and terrifyingly public. Let's rewind. When Victorian explorers pried open tomb doors in the 1800s, what they uncovered wasn't just gold and glory. They found explicit carvings, papyrus scrolls smeared with erotic scenes so intense, so graphic, that these buttoned-up scholars destroyed, censored, and buried the evidence. Why? Because the ancient Egyptians dove headfirst into sexual practices that shattered boundaries. Royal children endured unspeakable abuse from their own blood. Religious festivals erupted into week-long whirlwinds of violence, intoxication, and total sexual frenzy. Just when you think you've heard it all, you realize the truth. The shadowy rituals, the sexual customs, the secret trauma remained hidden not because Egypt was prudish, but because the Western world couldn't stomach it. Ready to go deeper? Ancient Egypt, from 3100 BCE to 30 BCE, blossomed along the Nile. Here, sex wasn't simply pleasure. It was a tapestry woven through cosmic mastery, godlike authority, and ruthless political games. Pharaohs weren't mere rulers. They were living gods, expected to wield supernatural sexual power. Madness, right? Their bedroom prowess was believed to control the Nile's floodwaters, feed the harvest, sustain the heartbeat of an entire society. The stakes for a single intimate act? Survival itself. But what made Egyptian sexual rituals so horrific? And why have historians hidden them for centuries? Let's uncover the proof, etched into stone temples and ancient papyrus scrolls. Victorians who first saw these carved images, scenes of wild orgy and violent ritual, simply couldn't cope. Faced with erotic murals and twisted artifacts, they smashed, burned, or locked away these treasures. They sanitized official dig reports, erasing anything that clashed with their morals. For Egyptians, sexual vitality shimmered as a cosmic force. Every act was a prayer. Positions weren't just for pleasure, they were literal forms of spiritual invocation. Sex and worship fused so seamlessly that the line between holy rites and personal ecstasy blurred. It shaped a place where sexuality saturated every layer of existence, from high palace intrigue to the dusty fields of peasants. But be warned, there's a grim, forgotten underbelly beneath all the golden romance. Royal children from noble lineages were ensnared in the web of religious duty. In their world, a young body was property of the temple, not a soul to be protected. Household slaves, especially the young, were exploited, religiously sanctioned, ritually abused. Think it stops there? When the Nile failed to rise and crops withered, these customs spiraled into violence and desperation. To please the angry gods, Egyptians unleashed the darkest sexual ceremonies, praying for divine intervention. The revelation that flipped Egyptology on its head wasn't found in a glittering pyramid, but a laboratory in 1925. Howard Carter's team, fresh from King Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered something utterly chilling. His genitals had been surgically altered, not by time, but by skilled human hands. Other royal mummies showed more patterns of deliberate mutilation, insertions of gold or resin. Sometimes bone regrowth revealed these rituals took place while the victims still lived. Suddenly, cryptic passages in ancient texts snapped into horrifying focus. Guided mutilations, spells to ensure an unbroken spirit in the afterlife, spells promising godly service for eternity. Pause. Imagine the world these practices reflect. If the dead were reshaped so drastically, what did that mean for Egypt's attitude toward the living? But the suppression of these truths was as modern as it was ancient. Victorian shame, not ancient secrecy, drove the deepest cover-up. Erotic artifacts were hidden away, plastered over, pulverized. Museums kept vaults of sexual relics in restricted wings, off-limits to women or regular visitors. The apparatus of sexual control in Egypt operated on a rigid hierarchy. At its top, the pharaoh's virility was a matter of national security. Every intimate display reinforced his god-king status. Nobles and priests mirrored these extremes to prove their power, while children and enslaved domestics, especially the most vulnerable, were subjected to abuses hailed as religious necessities. The fate of royal heirs. Nightmarish. Papyrus records and temple etchings detail the consecration of elite children to temple service at shockingly young ages. Initiated into sexual roles at 6 or 7, these children were taught their bodies existed only to serve the gods. Training was merciless, involving intricate poses copied from fertility myths, techniques for extending ceremonies, and a forced detachment to survive ritual endurance. Physical consequences? Catastrophic. Papyrus medical records chronicle chronic pelvic injuries, stunted growth, fatal infections, and lasting psychological trauma. Some survivors were left scarred for life. Many died young from complications, and those who escaped faced lifelong torment, flashes of pain and alienation, emptiness where trust should be. Elite households commodified child slaves, trading them for pleasure. Legal contracts confirmed this bleak market. Kids were priced, sold, displayed, held as status symbols with no stigma attached. The emotional damage was overwhelming. Broken psyches, fractured relationships, lifelong suffering. In ancient terms, divine trials. In modern psychology, complex trauma. Religion wrapped these horrors in the sanctity of devotion. Priests taught sexual servitude was the ultimate sacrifice, a blessing that elevated the chosen. Families were proud when their children were selected, blind to the brutality behind temple doors. Economically, this was an abomination. Archaeology hints that as many as 73% of temple youths perished in grueling 6-hour rituals. Wealthy devotees paid fortunes for exclusive access, keeping the priesthood rich across millennia. Now, are you ready for the apex of Egyptian excess? Welcome to the legendary Feast of Drunkenness. This festival eclipsed every other horror. Victorian scholars were so appalled, they torched entire manuscripts to prevent public exposure. Once a tribute to the goddess Hathor, the Feast of Drunkenness became a humanitarian crisis. Originating from a myth, the fierce lioness Sekhmet was pacified when gods tricked her with beer the color of blood, transforming her rage into compassion. Egyptians reenacted this every year. Everyone drank until possessed by the divine, casting aside all restraint. Preparations were vast. Temples brewed vats of strong beer, laced with hallucinogenic lotus or mandrake, triggering visions, delirium, and utter disinhibition. At sunrise, society unraveled. Slaves cavorted with masters in crowded marketplaces. Faithful wives deserted homes to join revelers. Children, heartbreakingly, weren't protected. Texts describe drunken mobs rampaging through homes, conscripting anyone, willing or otherwise. Communal unions celebrated as acts of divine merging. Men boasted feats of sexual endurance. Violence intermingled, leaving scars and fatalities, sometimes caused by trampling crowds. Clergy pronounced all acts, no matter how brutal, a sacred offering. Even child participation was a celestial blessing. Foreign envoys recoiled, branding Egyptians as elegant barbarians. Some nations banned visits for fear of moral corruption. After the week of chaos, the hangover wasn't merely physical, but psychological. Families shattered, bonds broken, infants conceived amidst wild abandon were marked as divine bastards. Economy came to a standstill, crops unmanned, commerce paralyzed, government dormant. Yet pharaohs insisted this was crucial. It vented social tension, inverted norms, but kept transgression contained to a festival. Archaeological evidence supports the stories. Temple floors were grooved to channel fluids. Restraints discovered hint bondages. Artifacts matched lurid descriptions. Roman annexation finally broke the cycle. Augustus ordered the destruction of temples, the burning of erotic scrolls, the eradication of sexual rituals. Many young temple initiates killed themselves, unable to adapt. Trauma persisted. Underground sects, smuggling rings, revivalist campaigns haunted Roman governors for centuries. Remnants survived modern obliteration. Victorian explorers triggered academic and public meltdowns. Erotic frescoes hurriedly plastered over, artifacts hidden. Major museums, like Cairo's, segregated sexual relics in male-only vaults. British museums mislabeled Egyptian erotic art as miscellaneous shards. Some papyri, like the Abbas, with over 40 sexual remedies, weren't fully translated until the 1970s. Scholars confessed to torching obscene papyri. Universities defunded sexual studies. Journals refused even evidence-based submissions. Erotic statues pulverized, museum wings locked. To this day, TV specials and public displays emphasize politics, faith, and art, sidestepping sex. The world inherits a sanitized Egypt, stripped of its messy, visceral complexity. Curious about the myths driving these behaviors? Ancient Egyptian cosmology even claimed creation began with a god's act of masturbation. Some fertility festivals featured public arousal and phallic processions to bless the harvest. The Turin Papyrus hilariously depicts cartoonish sex acts, debunking Victorian prudery. Yet not every practice was depravity. Tender love poetry, equitable marriage laws, and relatively easy divorce painted a dynamic, evolving picture of intimacy. Queer relationships, such as the embrace between Nyankhnum and Khnumhotep, suggest subtle tolerance far beyond rigid modern labels. Even some modern debates, like evidence for ritual clitoridectomy, show Egypt's obsession with purity had physical consequences, though not everyone agrees on scale or intent. What about incest? Royal sibling marriages mimicked divine unions between gods like Osiris and Isis, but the genetic toll was dire. King Tut's own frailties and diseases stemmed from inbreeding. Elite harems existed, with concubines trained in seductive arts, political intrigues swirling around intimate life. Aphrodisiacs, lettuce per myth, were commonly used. Sex in Egypt was never simple, never strictly depraved. Sometimes rituals were celebrations of ecstatic communal joy, with drumming and dancing awake the passions rather than mandated violence. But through history, one core pattern stands out. Faith mixed with fear, dominance weaponized through intimacy, children commodified, violence sanctified as devotion. The system ran for millennia, feeding the mighty priesthood and shaping society's soul. Why all this secrecy? Because the darkest secrets of ancient Egypt weren't buried for millennia. They were consciously suppressed in the last 150 years. Victorian shame, not Pharaoh's secrecy, scrubbed the record. Even now, Wikipedia pages on erotic rituals remain locked. Major museum relics are kept out of sight, and academic wariness clouds the full truth. So what's left? The echoes. The stories hidden in locked vaults, the murals quietly plastered over, the papyri preserved for only the boldest to read. These shadows reveal not just the horrors of sex as cosmic power, but how societies go to war with their own desire and their own conscience. Victorian collectors and museum curators, driven by the moral codes of their era, systematically segregated, mislabeled, and concealed thousands of sexually explicit Egyptian artifacts in secret collections, rooms, or even destroyed them altogether. This act of selective preservation shaped our modern view, steering discussion away from the visceral realities that defined much of everyday ancient life. Today, most exhibitions gloss over these topics or place them out of view, leaving a world still piecing together the whole story from censored fragments and whispered legends. By confronting this deliberate censorship, we begin to understand not only ancient Egypt, but also the deep discomfort many cultures still harbor toward the full truth of our collective past. If this story shook your view of history, imagine what other secrets still hide beneath the sands. Hit subscribe and join a community that's challenging the sanitized narrative and daring to confront history's wildest truths. Share this video if you believe more people should know the realities behind history's myths. Drop a comment with your thoughts, discoveries, or questions, because your curiosity fuels the next deep dive. Don't let these echoes disappear. Together, let's uncover the lost and the forbidden. The next journey starts right now.